Welcome, chattars. How are we doing today, chat? Doing good? Ooh, is this too bright? Looks weird. Okay, let's do that. Oh, I know what the problem is. Is that better? Chat, welcome. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I am a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything we're going to talk about today is for education and entertainment purposes only. So if y'all have a question or concern that actually is medical in nature, please go see a licensed professional. Happy Friday, everyone. I see that people are watching the UN Security Council, which is live. Are they live on Twitch or just like live on other things? They have their own website or what? Does the UN Security Council, can we sub and dono and gift subs? Thanks for the Prime sub, Shadow Arctics, YouTube. Okay. We'll get there one day with Twitch. How y'all doing today? People doing good? Happy Friday. Looking forward to the weekend. Right, the UN. Dude, we can make it happen. We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll catch the UN up to modern, disseminating information. And the stream, yeah, we're going to rate the UN Security Council. You know what would be hilarious is not rating the UN Security Council, but having them rate us at the end of stream. That would be hilarious. Like, what does that mean if you get rated by the UN Security Council? Details on the Valve feature. Yeah, so I actually did something super cool. I did a remote play stream, and do y'all know about this? This is actually really fantastic. I really liked remote play, like genuinely. So here's the thing. When I was growing up, before the days of the internet, chat, before the days of the internet, what would happen is like me and my friends, like we'd play like couch co-op, right? But then like not everyone would get the same game, because then what would happen is like I'd go to this friend's house to play GoldenEye and I'd go to this friend's house to play Mario Kart. And then I would have Smash Brothers. And so like between three people, like especially like in college and stuff, right? When you're at the dorm, the internet was a thing when I was in college, but it was really cool. Like, cause you could just, one person buys the game and then everyone plays on couch co-op. But like, now with this remote play, I don't know if you guys know about this, but this is, you don't need to own the game. Like you just have one person owning the game and then they remote play like other people in. And so it's wild. It's like, it's cool. I was very surprised. Anyway, so let's get to stuff. So a couple things, we've got group coaching spots still open. So if y'all are interested in that, be sure to check it out. I think some of the posts that we're going to be talking about today are actually themes that come up in group coaching a lot. One of the really common themes is about wearing a mask. So, well, I'll just explain this a little bit. So sometimes what happens is we have an internal self and we're afraid, or we've been taught that the internal self is like, people don't like that. So then what I do is I put on a mask, a really common problem with a lot of the content creators we work with too. And then like, I have to keep my mask on and then people like the mask, right? So I craft my personality and I put on this mask and then people like that. And so then I fall into an interesting problem, because the more that people like the mask, like the more I have to keep it on, because if I take it off, they're not going to like what's underneath. And then you end up getting into the situation where you're kind of stuck, like living a false life, right? Because now people like the fake me. They like the person that I pretend to be. So how do I go about taking that mask off? And generally speaking, that's very scary and requires a lot of vulnerability. And so one of the cool things about group coaching is that is a place where you can practice taking the mask off, right? So this is a group of peers that you'll have that will not necessarily accept you no matter what, right? That's not actually the point. The whole point is that they do get to judge you, but that we're going to be focused on authenticity and compassion instead of technically a non-judgmental space. That's a little bit different. But just what we want is people to be authentic and compassionate. And if they, if you have a problem like that people have concerns with, if you talk to someone a certain way, or you're coming off too strong, or you monopolize the conversation, the whole point in group is to gain awareness of those things and grow in those kinds of skills. And so a lot of what we see in a healthy way in group is like being able to take off the mask and like showing parts of yourself, right? Metaphorically, personality wise, okay? Not physically. And then having people hopefully accept you, right? Or say, hey, like that's a part of you that, you know, I think you should be careful about sharing with other people. And that's completely appropriate. Like that's part of the advantage. So if y'all are sort of stuck with a mask on and don't know who you are on the inside or are afraid to show people, the whole point of group is that we also set firm boundaries around what people are supposed to do outside of group. So you're not supposed to play games with people. You're not supposed to hang out. You're not supposed to date. You're not supposed to go into business together. And that's why it remains a safe place, right? Because like there's no impact. The challenge of taking the mask off is that if you do it, let's say with a boyfriend, girlfriend, with friends, with business partners, with coworkers, there can be other effects of that. There can be a cost of taking the mask off. The whole point behind group is like you can learn how to put it on and off because there's no cost. There's no like, you know, even if someone has an issue with you, that's something that you fix in group. So you work through that conflict in group. So anyway, if y'all are interested in that kind of thing, we'll talk a little bit about personality and finding who you truly are today and things like that. So you can't play a game with them. So no, I mean, we can't stop you, right? But we strongly, strongly recommend against it, right? So it's a place to do work because once you start playing games with people, like then it's different, right? Then there are a lot of people you can play games with. You can go hang out on our Discord and find people to play games with. Go for it. There are a lot of places where you can find people to play games with. So, okay. So I want to share with y'all what we're going to be talking about today. Anyone else watching Gamers Galaxy Dubai Invitational? Chatars? No. Yes. So we'll go ahead and I'm trying to catch up. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we're talking about today. So I want to share something with y'all. This is cool. Okay. This isn't really a post we're going to talk about too much, but so I just want to share this with you, okay? So this is it's cool that this is happening in our community. I tried asking someone out I've never met before and got rejected, and it felt great. TLDR, I went outside and asked out 2 random girls. I got rejected both times, and then I felt amazing. Thought I'd 25M share a story about me from a couple of years ago that might hopefully be of use to some of y'all. A little background first. For the longest time, I've had this fear that if I asked a girl out, she would respond with disgust or mockery. I'm pretty sure that's because of some bad experiences with girls in the earlier years of my teens. This caused me to not ask any girl out during my entire schooling, as I had a fear not only would whomever I asked out reject me hard, but everyone in the school would then mock me forever. So then the story. I met some dude in an online game and we started talking. The topic of conversation ended up transitioning to intimate relationships, and I opened up about my forever single status and my lack of confidence. This was very, very rare for me, as I'm hardly ever open up about myself. For the first time in my life, I then got encouragement from this random stranger, and I decided to go out and ask out some random girl. I made myself look presentable and headed out. I ended up asking 2 girls instead of just one because I thought, why not? And after getting rejected by the first one, I tried my hardest to be straightforward and not weird when I asked them out, and I think I did a good job of that at least. After the second rejection, I decided to go home and something magical happened. I felt so happy that I had a smile from ear to ear the entire walk home. There was no disgust or mockery from them. There was only warm smiles and polite rejections. In my perceived reality, that wasn't even a possibility until that day, and it marked an important milestone in my life, as I've asked out someone on a date to their face before. Later that day, during the late evening, I was just sitting alone in my apartment, stuffing my face with chocolate while gaming, feeling like a goddamn king. Basically, what I learned is, as long as I'm chill, other people will be too. I also discovered something about myself, that what I used to think was basically every girl I could ask out would be an evil bitch to me if I was polite. I realized that's a pretty screwed up thing to think about billions of people I've never met. It would imply some pretty unflattering things about me as a person. That's the story in my experience. Thank you for reading. It's fantastic. Right? So this is the thing. I don't have like a long, like, I mean, maybe we could talk, maybe we should. I don't know. I'm reconsidering, but I don't have something like long and complex to say about this. But we get paralyzed so much by what our mind substitutes for experience and actual knowledge. Right? So in the absence of actual experience, our mind will produce all kinds of stuff. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. And that's the crap that holds us back. It's all this conjecture. It's all this logic. It's all this hypothesizing, which comes from a place, is there for a reason. But then, like, we let those kinds of things kind of hold us back, right? Those are the things that end up screwing us over and keeping us from living life. And when you actually go out and start to, you know, give something a chance, give other people a chance, put yourself out there a little bit, right? Because rejection is not supposed to help you feel good about yourself, right? That's what we all think. But I think what this person did was really awesome because they asked someone out. They also respected their boundaries, right? And it sounds like the women were polite and even like positively responded, but said, thank you, but no thank you. Because asking someone out is like kind of flattering too, right? It doesn't feel bad as long as you respect their boundaries. So he's not like, why not? Give me a reason. Can I ask you tomorrow, right? So you like, by all means, ask someone out. And then if they say no, you move on with your life. And then like you've grown as a person. And that's what I love to see about this community is that like we're growing as people, right? It's not about necessarily getting a girlfriend. It's about you changing the actions of your life. You sort of starting to live a life that like you want to live and putting yourself out there. And then like the world, you'll be surprised at what the world gives you back. Right? Okay. So we've got 3 options. I'm going to try to figure out how to do this by their SEERF. So we're going to do, so we've got 3 options today. Let me see if I can figure this out. Creator dashboard. Let me see. Manage poll. Here we go. New poll. Okay. Which post? Okay, so we're going to take a look at a couple of posts. And then what we're going to do, we're going to vote. And then we can do whichever one y'all want. Okay? Okay, so post number 1. I'm externally happy but dead inside. If you were to look at my life from another person's perspective, it would look great. I work for a big tech company. As a hobby, I'm an athlete and compete on a national level. I'm healthy. I have a great family. I have some really close friends that are like brothers to me. However, this is all external, and on the inside, I feel empty. So option number 1 is feeling empty inside. Okay. Okay. Option number 2 is I hate my outer personality, but I love my inner personality. This is what it feels like to be disconnected from your true and authentic self when social anxiety makes me extra scared of rejection, and the personality I seem to show on the outside is aloof, nice, shy, and quiet. But my authentic personality is the opposite of what I show. I'm still nice and caring, but I'm also much more expressive, opinionative, talkative, daring, energetic, crazy, stubborn. Okay? So, hate outer personality. And then option number 3 is how do I get past my reclusiveness and find friends again? I'm a 25-year-old who's been living socially isolated life for most of my adulthood. I've been told to find a hobby group, but I'm worried I don't care enough about anything beyond being on the internet and playing video games. I want to hang out with people, but just in a casual way, not some specific thing like hiking all the time. On top of that, I'm worried from my work experiences that joining a group isn't going to get me the friendships that I want, et cetera, et cetera. So getting past reclusive. Okay, so let's take a look. The poll is already active. What? Hold on. Is there a poll active, chat? What? But I'm still editing it. How did that? It's only 2 options though. Okay, here we go. Which post? Okay. All right, so it looks like getting past reclusive is number 1. Hating our outer personality is number 2. And externally, how to be people who are externally happy but dead inside is number 3. Okay, great. Let's do it. Okay, I'm learning, chatars. I'm learning. Okay. So let's start with how to get past external reclusiveness. All right, so we're going to talk a lot about sort of related stuff today, okay? And so the theme for today is going to be there's the external world and then there's the internal world. And sometimes these things don't line up, right? Like, so whether it's like getting over your reclusiveness to find friends, whether it's finding purpose, even though your life seems to be good, whether it's sort of the conflict between internal personality that you keep hidden and external personality. So what is the relationship between the outside and the inside? And how do you navigate that relationship in a healthy way? So that's going to be the theme for today, okay? So let's start with this. How do I get past my reclusiveness and find friends again? Hi, Dr. K. I'm a 25-year-old male who's been living in a socially isolated life for most of my adulthood. I had one main friend group after graduating high school, but upon losing them due to petty drama, I've almost completely been IRL friendless. I've tried making friends at work to some degree, but it's never gone too far. One time it was unlucky because the guy moved away. I probably don't try hard enough, but I'm scared to push things very far. I'm worried I won't get accepted or I'll be coming on too strong by asking to hang out or whatever. I always hope people will eventually ask me to hang out, but it never happens beyond going to a bar after work on the off chance, which has made me feel even worse. These people never ask to add me on Facebook and usually don't look for me on Facebook to add me. I don't even know how people end up adding each other on Facebook anymore. I've seen plenty of my coworkers as mutual friends on there, but I'm largely left out. I've just never felt like I truly made a good friend in my adulthood, besides maybe the occasional online person. Even my few online friends at this point will sometimes put little effort into convos or not follow through with plans that they made with me, like they forgot or don't care enough, and this leaves me feeling very sad in my loneliness. I've tried reaching out to people from the past, but that only goes so far. I don't know what to do. I've been told to find a hobby group, but I'm worried I don't care enough about anything beyond being on the internet and playing video games. I want to hang out with people, but just in a casual way, not some specific thing like hiking all the time. On top of that, I'm worried from my work experiences that joining a group isn't going to get me the friendships that I want. I'm worried I won't meet someone who wants to hang out outside of the group thing, and I will become dissuaded again as a result. There's also a couple of dudes in my apartment building who I've thought about talking to, but not sure how I should initiate so I don't feel weird. What do you suggest I do? How can I get past this uncertainty and isolation so I can live a happier life again? It's a great post. So a lot of times what happens is we find ourselves in a situation where we want connections with other people, right? We crave connections with other people, and we get kind of rusty. So like we sort of have friends from high school, and then over time they start to like shed, right? We sort of lose one and then lose another and then lose a third. And then we sort of are aware that other people are able to form connections, but something gets in the way of us like forming connections. And then we eventually get to this place where like we don't even know kind of how to get started. And we'll sort of try a little bit here. We'll try a little bit there. Maybe you go out with friends after work, or you go out with coworkers. And then like, you know, some people like, there's like another step. So there's like some missing steps here where you can kind of see the other shore, but you don't quite know how to get there. You're on this shore, they're on that shore. And there's just something kind of missing in the middle. And so this is a really challenging thing to deal with. And it's something that we see increasingly common, especially as we become more online oriented, right? So as we start forming online relationships, like our skills at forming real relationships can actually get kind of rusty. And so the tricky thing here is that this is where a lot of people may sort of say, okay, if you want to make friends, you should do A, B, or C. And this is what's happened, right? So sometimes even our friends will say things like, oh, go do this. Like, go find a hobby group. Go do this. Go do this. Go do this. Go do this. But actually, if we really tunnel down, there's something quite subtle going on here, which is that even if there's something that we want to do, something gets in the way. And what gets in the way is actually ourselves, right? So I want y'all to like think a little bit about the conflict that this person faces. So they want to have friends, right? I'm completely almost IRL friendless. But when we sort of like start to look at this person, what are y'all noticing about this paragraph? Okay, I'm going to read it again. I've been told to find a hobby group, but I'm worried I don't care enough. I want to hang out, but just in a casual way. Not something specific like hiking all the time. On top of that, I'm worried from my work experiences that joining a group isn't going to get me the friendships. I'm worried I won't meet someone who wants blah, blah, blah. There's a couple of dudes who I've thought about talking to, but not sure. Right? So what's the common theme here? So this is where sometimes our mind works against us. So I don't know if this sort of makes sense or not, but like understanding how to overcome this starts by understanding what is the nature of mind and what's actually going on in our head. So I'm going to start with kind of a simple example. And what we're going to talk about today is how to tell when your mind is BSing you. Okay? So this is kind of weird, but I think this is a classic case of mind getting in the way. And what I'm going to share with y'all today is sort of a clue to figure out if your mind is BSing you. It's kind of weird, right? So the first thing to understand is that we assume that our mind is, generally speaking, monolithic and is working in our favor. So we assume that our mind works for us. And it sort of does, but it has its own goals. So the goal of the mind isn't necessarily to accomplish what we want, right? So I want to wake up every day. I want to exercise for an hour. I want to eat healthy. I want to learn how to paint. I want to learn piano. Like, that's going to be awesome. I'm going to grind at work. I want to buy me a yacht, and I want to go sail around the world by myself. I want all those things. And does the mind comply with that? No, right? The mind is like, let's play games. Why don't you sleep in for another hour? So the mind actually does, I want friends. No. But what if you get rejected? Right? So the mind is actually kind of interesting. Like, it doesn't necessarily do what we want it to. What the mind oftentimes does is tries to protect us. It's looking out for us, but it's kind of like an overprotective parent. Like, the mind is sort of like a helicopter parent, where it has the best intentions, but it doesn't actually it doesn't help us take risks. It doesn't let us take risks. And so much like a helicopter parent, what the mind can actually do is end up like stifling us, right? It doesn't give us an opportunity to grow. And so how do we tell when the mind is sort of like working for us, and how do we tell when the mind is kind of BSing us? And this is pretty cool because the way that the mind BSs us is the same exact way that the mind BSs other people. So I'll give you all an example. Let's say that I have a meeting with someone and the person, shows up 45 minutes late. Now, let's say that in two alternate universes, they say one of two things. Got a flat tire. Sorry. Or my dog was sick. Keys misplaced. I had a problem with my water heater. I thought we said the other location of this coffee shop. My phone charger died. My bad. Right? Which one is more believable? Which one is BS? Saved a kid from a burning building? Yeah, the charger died. Absolutely. Cat was sitting on your lap. These are great. Sorry, I'm 45 minutes late. My cat was sitting on my lap. Right? This is BS. So in the words of the great bard Shakespeare, me doth think he or she protests too much. Right? So, this is interesting. So what do y'all see here? Why doesn't this person have friends? Reason number 1. Reason number 2. Reason number 3. Reason number 4. Reason number 5. Right? There may be reason number 6 over here. Y'all see this? This is how the mind works. So let's try to understand a little bit about how our mind works. So, when we have a fear, if we're not careful, we've got these different parts of our mind. So we have our emotional mind, and we have our intellectual mind. And sometimes our emotional mind and our intellectual mind fight. Okay? So I'll give you all a very simple example of how your emotional mind and intellectual mind fight. Let's say you want to take a shower, right? So if you want to take a cold shower, for example, there's going to be something really simple that happens. You want to take a cold shower, and your mind is like, okay, taking a cold shower is healthy for me. It's a great way to wake up in the middle of the day. I mean, in the morning, right? It's a great way to start off your day right. Or if you're going to jump into cold water, let's say there's a pool that's a little bit chilly. And so in that moment, what do you notice within yourself? You notice there's a strong conflict. There's part 1 of your mind, which is fighting against part 2 of your mind. And you can feel that conflict. It's almost paralyzing. And so you sit there in front of the cold shower, and you're about to step in, and you have to like muster up your courage, right? So there's actually 2 things that are fighting against each other. And even though there's a part of you that wants to do it, there's another part of you that doesn't want to do it. So this is the real problem that a lot of people run into, is that if we're not careful, and we say, hey, how do I make friends? What'll happen is someone will say, why don't you do this? They'll problem solve for us. They'll say, oh, go join a hobby group. Go do this, go do that, go do this, go do that. But that's not where the problem is. The problem is in the willingness to do an activity, right? And what do we see here? There's a lack of willingness, which is not this person's fault. So we'll get to that in a second, okay? But I just want you to see what's going on here, okay? So then what happens is when we have a fear and our emotional mind is stronger than our intellectual mind, what it does is recruits reasons. Reason number 1, reason number 2, reason number 3. And so this is where we get kind of tricky. Why don't I have friends? Well, no friends because of reason number 3. This is what we think, right? Oh, look at all these good reasons I have for being a recluse. These are all really good reasons. Therefore it is logical, right? Because I don't want this to happen. I don't, you know, I I'm worried I don't care enough about this stuff. Like, you know, I want to hang out, but I don't want to be like hiking all the time. I just want to make friends. You know, joining a group isn't going to get me the friendships that I want. I've tried this before. It's not going to work. So when our mind is trying to convince us not to do something, you know, it's trying to justify not to do something, it says things like, it's not worth it. Don't bother. Waste of time. It starts generating thoughts like this. So that, but then it's kind of weird. Like, where do these thoughts come from? They come from here. So when we see this, what we see is that these are all reasons. Every single but. What is this saying we do? What is this? What is our mind telling us to do here? Right? What's the goal here between all these? But I'm worried I won't enjoy things besides being on the internet. I don't want to go hiking all the time. I'm away from work. Very good. Don't try. And do y'all see this? Like, does it make sense? Like, we have all these conflicting thoughts. Like, okay, I want to be alone, but our mind is actively telling us, like, don't bother. Don't try. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And this is where it's kind of interesting, because if I want friends, okay, so someone says, oh, like, go do a hobby group. Okay, so then what does our mind do? Blocked. Noob. Don't try. And then you're like, well, maybe I'll ask people at work. And what does the mind do? Blocked, noob. And then we're like, well, like, you know, maybe what I can do is add people on Facebook. And then the mind is like, don't bother. Blocked. So even as you try to do things, there's like this overarching feeling of don't try. Don't try, don't try, don't try. And why is that? Why would the mind tell us not to try? Because what is the mind there to do? The mind is there to protect us, right? It's being a helicopter parent. And the mind is afraid. So let's take a quick look at that. What is the mind afraid of, right? So, but it never happens going to the bar, which has made me feel worse. These people never ask me. I've seen plenty of coworkers, but they're largely left out. Even my few online friends will sometimes put little effort into convos, like they forgot or they don't care enough, and leaves me feeling sad or lonely. So let's look at what's actually happening here. When this person tries to reach out to people, when they try to form connections, what is the reward they get? Do they have tons of friends? Are people like, wow, you're such an awesome person. We love you so much. Let's hang out more. No. What it does is ends up feeling sad and lonely. That's how they end up. Right? So I'm not blaming this person. I'm just sort of explaining, actually, rather than blame, quite the contrary. I think their strategy is very effective. It's just got a different goal than what we originally realized. Because what happens is when you've had social experiences, so when your social attempts leave you sad and lonely, then your mind is going to tell you to not try. So each of their attempts, interestingly enough, actually fuels their not their lack of effort, their very profound effort at not trying. So this is the other thing to understand, is that a lot of people in this situation feel like they're incompetent in some way, or feel like they lack willpower, or feel like something is wrong with them. We're actually quite the opposite. Your mind is not weak. Your mind is incredibly strong. It's just got a different goal from the one that you have, right? So this is why no matter what you come up with, I mean, like, look at how hard this person has thought about this, right? They thought really hard, like, okay, what could happen at work? What could happen with friends? What's the problem with hobbies? They've thought through so many different things. This is not the sign of a weak mind. This is the sign of a strong mind pointed in the wrong direction. It's very different. And that's why it's so freaking hard. If your mind is weak, you could bludgeon it into obedience very easily, right? Like, you're not stupid, quite the opposite. Your mind is actually quite robust. The problem is that its goals don't align with your goals. And so no matter how hard you try, whether you're talking about hobby stuff, work stuff, online friends, like look at how much this person is trying. They're trying so many different things. And yet their mind is there like some friggin' Hindu god with 8 arms and 8 weapons. And no matter what direction you go, there's like a mace or an axe or a sword or something else blocking your way. It's like some weird, like Elden Ring multi-armed boss. So no matter what you do, like there's some weird arm sticking out of some weird direction that's there to block you. Right? It's some weird grafted creature that your mind has formed. And what are the arms? The arms are each of these experiences. Right? So like, almost completely IRL friendless. Petty drama. There's arm number 1. Feeling alone, arm number 2. I've tried making friends at work, but it's never got too far. I got unlucky. Arm number 3. I probably don't try hard enough. Ooh, look at that. A nice dose of self-blame. Right? Just to tack things on. Arm number 4. I'm scared to push things too far. Arm number 5. I'm worried I won't get accepted. Arm number 6. I'll come on too strong. Arm number 7. And I always hope people will eventually ask me out, but it never happens. Right? So all these different things, what do all these things lead us to do? Don't try. So now the question kind of becomes, what do we do about this? Okay? So there are a couple of things to think about. The first is that the emotional energy of don't try comes from these experiences. So what you have to do is emotional processing here. So this is where therapy can help for sure. But you have to understand that each of those experiences like buffs up this monster in your mind. Right? So there's a lot of emotional energy, and that's what I was sort of saying about the cold shower is like you can feel that internal resistance. Your mind is telling you go into the shower. Just step into the shower. It'll be over in a second. It'll be over in a second. Just step into the shower. It's not a big deal. It's going to feel cold for just a second. But your mind is like, no. And now as you start to problem solve, like, oh, get a hobby, go do this, go do this, go do this. There's that huge emotional bank of energy that's been built up. All those different arms. So you have to like process those things, and therapy is helpful. The other thing is just to acknowledge, second thing you can do, is acknowledge that this is hard for a reason. And I know this seems like it's not very effective, but this can be huge. So when you try to go do something, be prepared for what your mind is going to do, right? So anticipate it and say like, okay, I'm going to go hike. I'm going to like join a hiking group and just watch your mind, what it does. It says, don't bother, right? I want to hang out with people, not some specific thing like hiking all the time. So this is the other sign that your mind is BSing you. It uses phrases like all and never. Because that's not what life is like. Like, people don't just go hiking all the time. Like, what do you think you're signing up for? A year of weekend hikes? Like, no, that's ridiculous. But that's how your mind thinks, right? I don't care enough about anything. So look for strong words. Anything. All. Isn't going to get me friendships. Other thing that it's going to do is like, how I should initiate so I don't feel weird. You're going to feel weird, right? So this is the other thing that the mind tries to do is it sort of tries to make you do things in a painless way, because what's it trying to do? It's trying to protect you. It's trying to protect you from feeling weird. So it's not going to let you do anything unless you have a guarantee of not feeling weird. You see that? So acknowledge that this is hard for a reason and anticipate the resistance. And this is the key thing. When you notice that resistance, what you need to recognize is that that is not a resistance from this situation. That is a resistance from the past, So it doesn't actually technically even apply to this. It's just like energy that's left over, right? It's like you had a traumatic experience in the past. So if I've been bitten by a dog, when I see another dog on the street, my mind is going to tell me that dog is dangerous, even though that dog may not be dangerous. But it's the energy of the past that's carried forward to the present. So anticipate the resistance, and when you notice it, acknowledge that the resistance is an echo. It's not even there anymore. Okay? So this is really important. So you have to understand that this emotional energy of don't try comes from your experiences. You're allowed to feel that way. You're not incompetent. You're not an idiot or anything like that. This is just your mind looking out for you in the best way that it can. Right? So the mind is just like any other organ in the body. It's like if you eat something that's a little sus, your stomach is like, yeah, we're going to vomit for like 6 hours. And like, is it painful for you? Sure. But that's because the stomach is trying to protect you. And sometimes in the process, like it kind of makes you feel bad, right? But that's normal. That's what's supposed to happen. Like fever doesn't feel good, but it's your body trying to protect you. So your mind is going to try to do the same thing. It's going to try to protect you as best as it knows how. And just like, the body, there are times where the mind's reactions are not things that we actually want. It's doing what it knows how to do, but that's not actually what we want. That's why we take acetaminophen or ibuprofen. There are times where like we decide, okay, I know that the body wants to do this, but we're actually going to actively, for your benefit, not let the natural reaction occur. This is also why for people who have autoimmune diseases, for example, we'll give them like immunologic agents that are like suppressive in nature. We're going to shut down your immune system. We understand that your immune system wants to do a particular thing. That's not actually good for you. So in the same way, your mind is trying to protect you. It has this hyperactive mental immune system that's trying to protect you from everything. Don't leave the house. Don't leave the house. Don't leave the house. And we don't want to let that happen. So what we want to do is notice that the emotional energy is from the past. We can process it, and that'll make the force weaker. Okay? Second thing that we can do is anticipate the resistance. Be on the lookout for it and watch out for these kinds of words. All, anything, never. Waste of time. Because it's going to be very black and white. Next thing is to acknowledge that what the mind tells you is not actually from this moment, right? Because you don't actually know what's going to happen when you join a hiking club. You have no idea. Like, maybe they go hiking once a month and they do board games the second day a month. But you have no idea, but your mind doesn't tell you that, right? Your mind doesn't tell you when it's ignorant. In fact, quite the opposite. The human brain is designed to pull information, or draw conclusions with ignorance. That's how our mind is actually designed. It's like, look at the internet. The internet is full of opinions of people who have no idea what they're talking about, but they have no idea that they have no idea what they're talking about. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's a part of human psychology. So acknowledge that the resistance is actually an echo. This will make it easier for you to overcome it. 2 other tips that I'm going to give you. 1 is so what? So for each of these things that your mind tells you to do, ask yourself, so what? It's interesting because it kind of just stops there, right? So it's like, let's go through this. I want to hang out with people, but just in a casual way, not some specific thing like hiking all the time. So what? So just go. You don't have to hike all the time. On top of that, joining a group isn't going to get me the friendships I want. So what? So just try anyway. So if you don't get the friendships that you want, not a big deal. Right? So it's like, I don't know how to add people on Facebook. Just add someone. Like, you can add someone. If they reject you, so what? Right? And I'm not saying that that's sufficient, but it's a piece of the puzzle. So what this means is because when the mind is trying to trick us, if we're moving in this direction, the mind puts a wall up over here, and then we never actually look at this side, right? This side kind of remains absent. The mind doesn't actually play the tape through to the end because it's not a well-formulated thought. If you try to argue with it, it may come up with stuff, but then it's like, what's the big deal? Like if you you know, like let's use the example of people in your building, right? There are a couple people in my building, but, you know, I've thought about talking to, but not sure how I should initiate so I don't feel weird. Like, so what if you feel weird? Initiate anyway. Right? So this is where you should ask the question. So what doesn't mean you should just do it. It's genuinely ask yourself the critical question, what happens if you initiate and you feel weird? Like, what's the actual consequence of that? Are they going to kick you out of the apartment building? Are they even going to notice? Are they going to start talking about you behind your back? Like, you know, very practically, like if you want to meet people in your apartment building, you just walk up to them and say, hey, it seems like you moved in a little while ago. I've been living here for a couple months. My name is Alok. Nice to meet you. That's it. And then you just walk away. And then what happens is, like, second time around, like when you see them, you're like, hey, man, and then you know their name. So you're like, hey, so-and-so, what's up? You know, and then like you exchange small talk for like 2 or 3 different things. I refuse to elaborate. Right? So you exchange small talk a little bit, and then like maybe like you can open yourself up to being, you know, maybe they want to hang out sometime. And then otherwise what you can do is just like, I know it sounds kind of weird, but like you exchange 3 small talk conversations, and then you're like, hey, you want to grab lunch sometime? Or like, I'm making chili. You want to come over? Like, you just ask, right? And they're like, sure. Give them a little bit of notice. Be like, hey, I'm planning on making chili on Friday night. Would you like some? And then they can say like, sounds great, but I'll pass. I'm like, cool. And then you're done. Or they're like, yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm not sure if Friday works for me. And you're like, okay, totally fine. Like, I'm planning on making it Friday. Do you want me to just bring you a bowl like Saturday morning? It reheats really well. And then that's it. So very practically, you just introduce yourself first, right? So a lot of times the reason we're socially anxious is because we put too much emphasis on the interaction. So this is kind of like 4A, where like guide. So how to meet people in your building. Introduce yourself. Hi, my name is. You don't have to have a long conversation. If you want to, you can ask questions like, you know, 1 or 2 questions about if they're new to the area or what, but like you don't ask too many personal questions. Or if you're new to the area, you can ask people, you can say like, hey, I'm new to the area. I'm wondering if you're like familiar with this place and have any recommendations for good things to eat in the area. You just introduce yourself. 3 to 5 times small talk or saying hello. Simple invitation with an easy way to back out for them. Hey, I'm making chili on Friday. Easy to make, you know. Would you like some? You want to come hang out, or I can bring you a bowl the next day if you want. Right? So like, be like, no, I'm good. Right? And then like, then you kind of know, because they'll pick up where you left off, because you want to give them an opportunity to respond, but you don't want to force them into an answer. Okay? Tip number 5. So if you want to understand how to overcome your mind, you need to practice overcoming your mind. Cold showers. Right? So pick something. Pick something where you feel that resistance, where a part of you wants to do something and a part of you doesn't want to do something, and just practice that. So this is kind of the thing, is like, you know, all of these functions of the mind are very, very basic. This is why meditative practices are so good at helping so many different dimensions of your life. Meditation helps people be more empathic. It helps improve their relationships. It helps improve their attention, focus, concentration, forgiveness, motivation. Like, how the hell does that work? It's because meditation is teaching you how to use the controller that is your mind. So once I understand how to use a keyboard and a mouse, I can make a piece of art, I can make a web page, I can write a novel, and all I have to do is learn how to use the tools of the keyboard and the mouse. So meditation is teaching you the tool of your mind and how it works. That's why it has so many different outcomes for so many different things. Because you're like we don't get taught like what is the keyboard and mouse of our internal environment. You want a cold shower alternative? Anything that involves an internal conflict of the mind. So for me, I tried this for a while. I'm kind of good now. Going on roller coasters, right? Jumping into water. Eating a food you dislike. Anything that engages internal resistance. That just practice overcoming internal resistance. Not the food. Yeah, working out when you don't want to is a good example. Okay? So, to summarize. First thing to understand is that a lot of times we end up being reclusive and we don't want to. We yearn for connection. We want human connection. But despite the fact that we want it, our mind actually sabotages our efforts to form connections with other people. And then things get even trickier because oftentimes we'll blame ourselves for our situation, which makes us feel more incompetent and incapable, which in turn makes it harder for us to naturally interact with other people. So how do you understand when your mind is actually working against you, right? So there are a couple of simple things. So when your mind provides a ton of different reasons to not do something, that's when you know that there's something else going on. Because if there's a single reason to not do something, like that's totally fine, right? But how do you know when your mind is BSing you? When it gives you 1,000 reasons. And all of those 1,000 reasons are like little streams that end up in one place. They always go to the ocean, which is don't try. And so then the question becomes, where does don't try come from? It comes from the emotional hurt of your past experiences, oftentimes. And so what your mind is actually trying to do is protect you from yourself and from taking risks and hurting yourself. It's bad enough to be lonely. It's worse to be lonely and rejected. So your mind is like, yeah, we're not going to bother. The interesting thing is that aspect, I mean, even though it's doing what it's supposed to be doing in a sense, it's kind of like a helicopter parent. And by being overprotective, it's actually creating the problem that it's trying to protect you from. That's the trickiest thing about the mind. Right? So that's how you know when your mind is BSing you. And you'll see that it's doing all this stuff all the time. Right? It's like, you'll see this like with people who are addicted to stuff, where it's like your mind is like, no matter what you try to tell your mind is like, yeah, let's just drink more alcohol. You can come up with whatever reasons to not drink alcohol that you want, but you'll make better friends, you'll do this, it's going to be so much fun, like it's not that big of a deal, you can get sober on Monday, like there are all kinds of things. You'll see all this rationalization come out of your mind. So how do you deal with that? The first is to recognize and accept that you are not incompetent or anything like that. In fact, quite the opposite. That your mind is trying to protect you because you've been hurt a fair amount, and that's probably not your fault. The second thing to think a little bit about is that when you try to do something, anticipate the resistance. So look out for your mind trying to do something to you. Look out for it sort of telling you, hey, 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 don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Next thing is when that resistance arises, recognize that that's an echo from the past. It doesn't actually relate to this situation. I mean, it may be related peripherally, but it's not actually a truth of this situation. It's an echo from the past. So therefore, you don't actually have to listen to it. Next thing to consider is that you can practice overcoming internal conflict. And cold showers are sort of the simplest, most accessible way to do it. That is, like, generally speaking, safe and probably good for you physiologically as well. And just because you're afraid to take a cold shower, like that's the point, right? Because your mind doesn't want to do it, but it's like, what the hell is what's gonna cost you if you take a cold shower? A few moments of discomfort. That's it. And so then we get to the last thing, which is like, so what, right? Play the tape through to the end. When your mind tries to protect you from things, it doesn't really think things through all the way to the end, because all it's trying to do is stop your behavior. It doesn't actually like think things through to the end, because if it thinks things through to the end, you may end up with a reason to actually do it. And then your mind doesn't want to do it, so it's not going to engage in that process, right? Why investigate for things that you don't want to find? So start to play things through to the end. Ask yourself, so what if this thing that my mind is afraid of happens? What's the actual consequence of that? Think it through. And then start to realize that most of the barriers that your mind puts up actually are going to kind of dissolve under scrutiny. It's kind of bizarre, but that's just how it works. Questions? Yeah, so someone's asking, how do you deal with people that criticize you for trying to making a wrong choice? So I would remember that in terms of criticism, there's constructive criticism, and then there's just non-constructive criticism, right? So what are the person's intentions? Is the criticism constructive in nature? Are they telling you that you made the wrong choice to like stick your nose in it? Or are they like trying to help you in some way? So it's important to acknowledge mistakes if you've made them. That's an important part of moving forward. But to really think a little bit about, is this criticism helping me grow in the right direction? If the answer to that question is no, I would set boundaries around the criticism as best as you can. So that's where, like, you know, you can, if you live with the person, like a parent who's like, hey, you made a mistake, you can sort of tell your parents, hey, you've mentioned that to me before. I'm curious, why do you mention it again? Ask them why they're doing it. Well, because I want you to understand. Okay, help me understand, like, what does understanding look like to you? What are you looking for from me? And so you can ask them a couple questions, then you can sort of like hear their perspective and then lay a boundary and be like, yeah, so I don't find that to actually be helpful. And in fact, when you bring it up over and over again, it tends to make me want to resist and makes me frustrated with you and makes it less likely for me to listen to you. Because that's what happens, right? When people nag, you tend to want to ignore what they say. So you can kind of share that with them and then just set a limit around it. Be like, yeah, so it sounds like you're criticizing me again. I've told you in the past it's not helpful. I'm going to literally walk away from this conversation right now. And then you just walk away. That's how you set a boundary. So limit the criticism. And if people can't hear you when you set a limit, I would limit your interactions with them. Because it's not helpful. This is me and my mom. Yeah, you're damn right. It's like half the kids in the world and half their parents. Parents, like, they just randomly say crap without thinking about what effect it actually has. Right? So you can, I'm not saying just don't talk to your mom. The point is to have a conversation with your parents about what the purpose of them nagging you is. And you can even ask them, like, so you've told me that you think I made a mistake about my major like 18 times in the past 2 weeks. Is it having the effect that you want it to have? What effect do you think it's having? So like go a little bit meta, like rise above it. Ask them questions like this. What's the goal of this? Do you think it's working? Are you going to keep trying? So what if I were to tell you that it actually makes me feel the opposite of what you're intending? That the more you nag me about it, the more I want to stop listening to you. And every time you tell me, I listen to you less and less and less. And then ask them, what do you think about that? Well, you need to listen more. And it's like, I mean, you're allowed to think that. But at this point, I'm kind of reaching the level where, so it sounds like you're not really hearing really what I'm saying. So I'm finding conversation with you to be like not productive. So at this point, I'm inclined to stop talking to you, except if I really need to, or talking about this thing anyway. What do you think about that? And oftentimes parents are like kind of taken aback and they'll just kind of double down and just say like automatic crap. And you can kind of acknowledge that. You can say, so I just hear you repeating yourself over and over and over again. So this is exactly what I mean when I say that I don't feel like conversation between us is productive, because I'm saying things, but it doesn't seem to affect what you're saying at all. Like, I don't feel like you're hearing what I'm saying. And they're like, but I don't think you're hearing what I'm saying. No, I heard you. I'm just telling you it has the opposite effect from what you're intending. And then like, meh. And then you're like, yeah, so like, let's just take a break. Let's try to like revisit this in the way that we communicate in a week. Right? This situation is difficult with the older generation. Don't blame the older generation. Be careful. A situation between two generations has two components to it, right? Y'all understand that? So there are two elements to this. And if there are two elements, then you have a contribution as well. Make sense? Okay, we're going to take a 1 minute break real quick. And then we'll pick up with people who hate their who aren't able to access their internal personality. Okay. Hide under your desks. Oh my God, I came back and the classroom is empty. Oh no. Where'd everyone go? Oh my goodness. Everyone disappeared. Give music back. You guys want to do music stream? Okay. Next up. Let's look at what we've got next, chattars. Can I just say, Elden Ring is a phenomenal game. It's so good, dude. I've been trying to play Lost Ark. I've been like, oh my God, I need to like grind on Lost Ark. Oh my God, I have so much Lost Ark to play. There's a new Dota patch and I haven't even played it. But, oh my God. It's just so good. All right. Work, chat. We have to work. Okay. I hate my outer personality, but love my inner personality. This is what it feels like to be disconnected from your true and authentic self. When social anxiety makes me feel extra scared of rejection, the personality I seem to show on the outside is aloof, nice, shy, quiet, and whatever other good, innocent thing people might think I am. I loathe this person at this point. It feels like everyone around me acts like I'm about to break, like I'm so fragile, like I like quiet music or some crap that I don't even care about. I feel like I end up attracting people who think I am that kind of person. I don't even enjoy talking with them, but I'm a people pleaser with no boundaries, so I have to pretend like I do. My authentic personality is the polar opposite of what I show. I'm still nice and caring, but I'm also much more expressive, opinionated, talkative, daring, energetic, crazy, stubborn, love loud, catchy music with a wide range of interests, and I definitely love a good debate. There's such a huge difference between who I really am, between who I show, and all I have ever learned from my childhood programming is to suppress who I really am. I was never truly feeling like I was connected to myself and with anyone around me other than one person from my past. I tried to force myself to act like the person I believe I am, but that it was an epic failure because it felt like I was faking it, and people didn't react too well to what I was trying to do. And then I'm surprised I'm still friendless. It's such a horrible feeling knowing in your head that you're someone pretty cool and that you have a lot to offer, but suppress all of that anyway and not know how to act any different. Telling me to just be myself or just be authentic isn't working. Anyhow, I'm at a loss as to how to connect to myself at this point. I just can't act like myself. I don't even know what it means. Fear is controlling my life for decades now, and I'd love to hear some advice. So, this is tough. So a lot of times, especially early on, we have certain impulses, right? We have this natural personality that develops. And then through conditioning, through feedback, through parents, through school, through all kinds of other things, we learn to suppress the person that we are. And we start to play the game. We start to be conditioned to be nicer, be quieter, be less risque, less contrarian, to be more agreeable, to get rid of our boundaries and let people do and say what they want, right? And so what happens is like the real you starts to get buried under this polite false you. And then like we get frustrated with this, right? Because we know that like this is not the real me. Like I'm putting on an act, but like I really want to let loose. I want to be free because it feels so constraining to always be quiet and polite and agreeable and all this kind of stuff. And you want to listen to loud music. You want to say things that are a little bit crazy. You want to engage in debate. And the worst thing is that like, as you start to pretend to be this quiet, nice person and you kind of bury your inner personality, you start to attract a certain kind of person, right? And so the people that you attract are going to like reinforce that personality. And if you try to show them something else, they'll be like, this isn't what I signed up for. And so you kind of get stuck in this cycle. And then out of desperation, so then what happens is the frustration builds up, right? It's like, oh my God, like, I'm tired of being this person. I'm tired of being this person. I'm tired of being this person. I'm going to let loose. And then I want y'all to like look at this sentence because this is an oxymoron. I can't just act like myself. Being yourself is not an act. If it's acting, you're not yourself. Do y'all get that? I tried to force myself to act like the person I believe I am. So you try to force it. Right? At some point, you're kind of like, enough is enough. And then you let her rip. And then it feels artificial. People don't respond well to it. You don't feel great about it. You strive to be this authentic self, which you buried a long time ago. You don't want to be constrained by the person that you are today. You can be so much more. And so you like take a chisel and you start digging down through your personality. And as you dig down through the personality, like you're hoping that this beautiful thing that's been buried deep below will start to come up. And what comes out is something that's artificial. So, how do we deal with this? How do we understand this? What the hell is going on? So I know it's kind of weird, but like, we have to start by understanding what is true personality and what is false personality, and whether any of those things are actually the right way to think about it. So if the goal that we have is to uncover our true personality, so let's say we have a true personality. So here's the problem that we face, actually, is that we've got a true personality and it's covered by a false personality. And we get frustrated with this. So what we do is we start digging through this, and we want to kind of let this out, but sometimes it doesn't really come out. And instead what we end up doing is we end up like kind of yanking it out. But then it feels forced. It feels artificial. And since we've attracted a bunch of people who like this person, they get kind of pushed away by the true personality underneath. And I think this sentence says it really well. I force myself to act like the person I believe I am. Are you really this person? Who really are you? So this is where I think the way that this problem is framed is the problem. Because is there a true personality and a false personality? Let's just think about this, right? What is personality? Is there a true personality? Is there a false personality? How would we be able to tell the difference? Like scientifically, like how do you know what's your true personality and what's your false personality? So this begins with, first of all, understanding personality. So question number 1. In order for there to be a true personality or false personality, that implies a certain staticness to personality. You'll get that? Because like a piece of it is true and a piece of it is false. That means that it is boundaried and definable. Because this is the real one in here and everything outside is false. Y'all get that? That's sort of a, kind of an interesting thing. So my first question to you is, does personality change over time? Is it static or does it change? Absolutely, it changes. So that's kind of interesting. So how do we know then that this one is true? Like, it's kind of weird, right? Because if it's changing, like there may be a certain aspect of personality that's true now, but it's not necessarily true later. So that kind of gets confusing. And so, which part of our personality is true, which one is false? So the first thing to understand is that, because now now we can sort of get some sense, because if personality changes, this is what your personality used to be, true, and then you put on a mask, and then this is what it is now, right? I don't even know what that thing is, but it's different. And we call this one a false one. It's like a costume. And so then we try to go back and reclaim this, but like, how do we know that this isn't truly who we are? Because it seems like being this person is very effortless to this person. Right? So why do we define this point as true as opposed to a point back here or a point, I guess we can't define it in the future, but. So it's kind of interesting because I would even argue to say that like the whole point here and what's so frustrating is that you're attaching yourself to something that you believe you are, but that's not actually what you are. And then when you force yourself to be something that you're not, then that's what actually creates all the artificiality and makes it really, really hard. And that's what results in the outcomes that this person is seeing. Because these outcomes are not good, right? I try to force myself, but it was an epic failure. That's because you're forcing yourself. Whereas I think the real personality is not something you have to force. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Your authentic personality is the opposite of being forced. It's just what you are in your natural state. And so it makes sense to me that if you force yourself to act like the person that you believe you are, it's going to be an epic failure. Oh yeah, I'm a confident Chad. I believe I'm a confident Chad. So I'm going to go around, I'm going to be awesome. I'm going to be great. I'm going to be better than all the other betas. I'm an alpha. And then that usually doesn't work well. Right? So this is kind of weird. So what are we? So we're going to lean a little bit on the yogic perspective. I like this perspective of personality. So this is where they say that the truest part of ourself is neti, which means not this, not this. So if you look at the core aspect of being, it does not have attributes. And that if we look at essentially like what we consider personality, that we have a core self, which is like empty, And then we like layer things on top of it. We layer identity on top of it. So like key things here are like gender. Then maybe over here is being a parent. And over here is, let's say, being a streamer. And over here is being an animal lover, right? So I'm a dog person or a cat person, right? And then over here is vegan. But maybe these are wrong. Maybe vegan is down here and gender is at the top, like who knows? So we like start adding all these things that we sort of consider our personality. But the interesting thing is that, you know, these things can fluctuate because I may not always be a vegan. I may think of myself as a dog person, but then it turns out that my roommate gets a cat and then suddenly now I'm a cat person. So then this changes. I used to be a dog person. I used to be a cat person. Sometimes we also understand that gender changes, right? A streamer and then I retire, or, you know, I stop being a streamer, whatever. I get canceled. So that's no longer true. And so our personality, like essentially what the yogis sort of figured out is that all this stuff is temporary, therefore it can't be the foundation of what we are. So what is the foundation of what we are? It's neti-neti. The other kind of thing that they sort of concluded was that the experiencer, or that which experiences, is what we are. So this is also very similar to the conclusion that Descartes came to, right? Which is cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. So this is going to be, I'm sure, an oversimplification, and there are good philosophy people out there, but based on my understanding of Descartes, basically what he was saying is that, how do I know what's real? Well, even if there are dreams, and even if I think he uses like the devil, like even if the devil causes hallucinations in my mind that make me question the nature of reality, I don't know if the table is real, I don't know if the screen is real, I don't know if the outdoors are real, because they're altered states of consciousness and the devil may be able to trick me. At the end of the day, though, there is something to be tricked, right? That's the one thing that's inescapable, is that there is something to be tricked, no matter what on the outside exists. And whether it's tricked, whether it's a hallucination, or whether it's real, there is something there to be tricked. Cogito ergo sum. And so the yogis and Descartes then deviate a little bit, because the yogis say that's it. That's the whole of it. In fact, that is the purest nature of what we are, is the experiencer. And then what is our personality? Our personality is a summation of rules that we apply based on experiences. So in the East, they think that personality is essentially a compilation of all of our samskaras. And so if we think about what does that mean? It means that if you take a shared situation, right? Let's say Lost Ark is being released, okay? So when Lost Ark gets released, people are responding to this situation in a number of different ways based on their personality. So some people are buying the 3-day early access. Some people are buying the 3-day early access plus whatever pay-to-win mechanics like Crystalline Aura or whatever, which is not that pay-to-win. Some people are free-to-play hardcore. Some people are filthy casuals. Right? There's like all kinds of different ways that people respond to this. And so when we look at Lost Ark, and then we look at, you know, things like social situations, we look at family relationships, when we look at creative pursuits, like are you writing a book or not, right? So some people, like Brandon Sanderson, write 5 extra books a year during the pandemic. Some people stall and don't write. And then there are people like me who want to quit my job and start writing fiction. Right? So there's all kinds of people. So what happens when we look at personality, it's like when you do this thing plus option number 1, 2, and 3, And then your relationships are like 1, 2, and 3. So when I do this one, this one, this one, and this one, this is what I call personality. Because it's a constellation of how I respond to in different scenarios, right? That's what we call personality. But all this stuff changes. It can change over time. So if you're stuck between your internal and external, like if you think you have a true authentic self buried deep down there, which you sort of do, but the key thing is that if you think your true authentic self is A, B, and C, and your false sense is X, Y, and Z, actually your truest authentic self is like none of these things. That's what the yogis would say. And therein sort of lies the problem, because if you try to uncover your true self, practically you can, so we'll get to that in a second. But practically, you could try to uncover your true self, but then especially if you end up forcing it, and it doesn't, in the words of our poster, results in an epic fail, like that's not the right strategy. So interestingly enough, what I would suggest is a frame shift from a static idea of unearthing buried personality to a dynamic idea of creating personality. So if you have XYZ, you can say, oh, I should be ABC, and let me force it, let me construct, let me just like dig in there. Because the idea then is that if I access my authentic personality, it should be easy. But it's not easy. It becomes forced. It becomes difficult. It doesn't go well. So instead, what I would suggest doing is just acknowledge that, like, for better or for worse, the way that you've been conditioned, because personality is also determined by conditioning, right? Because we're shaped by our experiences. We sort of know that. That's why, like, some people who have poor attachment will end up being timid in life. At that point, it's at the level of personality. And you can make personality changes. So we know that narcissism, for example, is an attribute of personality. We know that agreeableness is an attribute of personality. And those are not static. They can actually change over time. You can become less egotistical. You can become less agreeable. You can become less of a doormat, even though it is your, to a certain degree, your personality to be a doormat, right? Because even this person sort of says, I am a people pleaser with no boundaries, so I pretend like this needs to change, right? It's not that you truly are a people pleaser or you're not a people pleaser. Neither of those things are actually relevant. I think the frame shift that needs to happen here is, if you are a people pleaser, I don't know how you answer the question whether that's deep down a true part of your personality or a false part of your personality. I don't know how to answer that. Like, think about that scientifically. Like, I don't know. If you engage in people pleasing now, that's the important thing. If you want to shape your life, that needs to change. Whether it's a true part of your personality or a false part of your personality feels artificial to me. Because the whole point is that all this crap can change. Even gender can change. So instead of focusing on unearthing your personality, it's a stepwise process. First thing that we're going to do is learn how to set boundaries. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel bad. People are going to dislike it. They're not going to like it when I set boundaries. This is going to be hard. Then what we're going to do is we're going to listen to loud music in front of other people. And that's going to feel artificial. It's going to feel weird. It may push some people away. Then what we're going to do is start debating randos, right? And that's going to push even more people away. But the whole point is that instead of trying to uncover your personality, which to a certain degree we're going to talk about in the next one, because I think there's some value to using that model, you don't need to uncover it. If you are, because like you have to accept where you are. So start with where you are, which is here. If you want to end up here, that's totally fine. If you believe you are something, it doesn't matter whether you truly are that thing or you're not that thing. You can become that thing, because personality is dynamic. Right? We started off with that idea. And so instead of trying to force yourself to be what you believe you are, just make yourself into that thing. You may say like, oh, Dr. K, that sounds so like you can't just do it. But it's like yes and no. Because I think part of the reason that we get so stuck in this situation is because we are trying to solve a problem that does not exist. We are looking for something that does not exist. And then how the hell are you ever going to find it? Right? It's like, I believe the earth is flat, so I'm going to sail to the end of the world. Like, good luck. You know? So, like, the reason that we get stuck, I want y'all to understand this very well, okay? This is important. The reason that we get stuck is not because we're incompetent, not because we lack willpower. The reason we get stuck is because we misunderstand our problems. Number one reason. Because if you just think about it, all the problems that you correctly understand are the ones that you naturally fix. And then the ones that you're left with are the ones that you have misunderstood. Right? I mean, we understand that from medicine. We understand it from all kinds of different dimensions. Jung sort of discovered this with the shadow. Right? He sort of realized that all the things that we're aware of are the ones that we can work on. And that human beings are fundamentally like capable of making progress. And if you think about even from the medical profession, it's like if someone has 3 diseases, disease 1, 2, and 3, this one is diagnosed correctly, this one is diagnosed correctly, and this one is diagnosed incorrectly. This one I'm going to treat and then it gets fixed. This one I'm going to treat and then gets fixed. This one I'm going to treat and doesn't get fixed. It's because of a problem of diagnosis. Make sense? So instead of trying to uncover your personality, accept for a moment that personality is dynamic and can be shaped by you. I'm not saying it's easy, but at least it's doable, as opposed to looking for something that does not exist. Now, like I said, there's a big caveat there, because I do think that there are more authentic parts of yourself. Like we sort of mentioned, there are things up here, the higher up we go, the easier it is to change. Today, I like wearing this piece of clothing. That can change easily. And as we go down deeper, we do know that there is like some evidence of, not staticness, but let's say sluggishness to change. So the 5-factor model sort of suggests that you can move a little bit, but that some people are kind of like, have a strong propensity for this thing. Other people have a strong propensity for this thing. There are levels of personality that I think can all change, but there are things that are easier to change and things that are a lot more sluggish to change. So that's absolutely true. And generally speaking, when we think about the most sluggish aspects of personality, those are going to be the parts of our personality which we think of as truer. So there's a contrary argument to this, for sure. We'll get to that even in the next post. But I think the big shift that needs to happen is to recognize that you can change into what you want to be instead of trying to find what you already are. Okay? Questions? Actually, let me just summarize. So, a lot of times we end up looking, or there's a conflict between our true and authentic personality and the mask that we put on, the person that we pretend to be. And then what we end up doing is we try to like really look for that deeper self. We try to uncover it. We wish we were it. We blame ourselves for, giving into this false personality and putting on a mask. And it can be incredibly frustrating. And then as that frustration builds up, we try to force ourselves to unearth what we truly believe we are. But the more we force ourselves, the more we actually move away from what we are. Because in my natural state, I'm just chilling. This doesn't require any force. This requires, actually this doesn't require force because I'm sitting properly, but you guys get the point, right? So as you move towards your natural inclinations, it shouldn't be forced. In fact, it should be the opposite. Natural and forced is like 2 different things. So if you're forcing yourself to adopt what you believe you are, the real thing that you should probably do is consider reshaping the way that you view personality. And it starts with this. Is there even a true personality and a false personality? How would you know what's true and what's false? What is personality? And the true and the false personality kind of are associated with sort of this idea of static personality. Like there is a true one and there is a false one. But that's not how it works, right? Because our personality changes over time. It's not static, it's dynamic. If it's dynamic, then what's true and false can also be gets called into question. And so instead of trying to uncover what you believe you are, just start shaping yourself in the direction that you want to go. If you are a people pleaser and you have trouble setting boundaries, that's something that you can change about yourself. It's absolutely something you can change about yourself. I've had tons of patients who used to be pushovers. They used to be doormats. And it is very uncomfortable to set boundaries. But as they grew as people and as they worked on it, now they're able to set healthy boundaries. Still makes them feel a little bit uncomfortable, but they're totally fine with it now. Right? So you can change. And instead of trying to uncover what is already there, just build what you want to be. And that's the frame shift that you probably need. Questions? Okay, so what's my opinion on personality theory systems like MBTI and Enneagram? So I think for a lot of these things, there are data-driven systems, like the 5-factor personality model is the #1 data-driven model. And there are systems like MBTI and Enneagram, which I think are less data-driven. So MBTI, for example, says that they're very data-driven, but I have yet to see independently verifying research. So most of the MBTI research is proprietary, so we don't really know. And secondly, tends to be published primarily through their journal, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's false. The interesting thing is that I don't think that the objective truth of it actually matters very much, because I think what it absolutely is, and I went through an MBTI training and residency that was incredibly helpful, is that it's a heuristic and it has like functional value. So even if MBTI is like true or not true is not the question. The question is, if you teach people MBTI, does it lead to utility? And in my experience, that answer has been largely yes. Enneagram, less information about. So I think that they can still be useful because they're ways of looking at ourselves that help us understand our own dynamics and give us a way of interacting with other people, which I think can have utility, irrespective of the fact that it may not be true. And this is the interesting thing, is that Myers-Briggs, I think, for example, has greater utility than 5-factor, because the 5-factor stuff is really about searching for truth as opposed to searching for something that's helpful. So they're like helpful models and they're true models, right? Even if you think about like video games, we have a lot of models that are not true. There are things that we develop heuristically. So I play Dota 2, for example, and there are different positions. There's position 1, position 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's not technically in the game, right? There's nothing that says that this is a POS 5 hero, this is a POS 1 hero. It's a concept that we use, and when we all sort of use these concepts, they bring utility, even though they're not objectively true. You can't open up any line of code in Dota and find POS 1 or POS 5. So things can have functional utility without being objectively true. And another good example of that is a projective test from psychiatry or psychology, right? So we have these things called projective tests, like the ink blot test or the Rorschach test. There's nothing objectively true about the ink blot test, but it can still be valuable because it's a projective test. So it's just some way for the mind to project what is in there onto the test. And it can be sort of internally validated and stuff like that too, which ink blot tests have been. So even though it's not objectively true, it can still be useful. Right? And then there are other things. So like tarot and astrology are other examples of things that may have value, functional value, without having objective truth. And this is where what we oftentimes will do is assume that there is objective truth if there is value, functional value, which is a conversation for a different day. Okay. I think we may be out of time. Oh my God, it's 1:40. Do we have time for one more? I kind of want to do this one. Okay, we'll try to run through this one. Okay. All right, I want to get through this one. We may have to, we'll see if we have time for meditation, but I think this is an important thing. So externally happy and dead inside. If you were to look at my life from another person's perspective, it would look great. I work for a big tech company as an intern. As a hobby, I'm an athlete and compete on the national level. I am very healthy. I have a great family in terms of parents and brothers. I have some really close friends that are like brothers to me. However, this is only the external perspective. On the inside, I feel extremely empty. I often think that I'm a boring person. I have almost everything a normal person would want except a girlfriend. I'd love to be in a relationship again. I miss the intimacy that goes along with it. Not sex, but more like cuddling, etc. The last relationship ended because she started partying and drinking often. I hate parties and casual drinking. I can't think of anything more boring. I prefer to do my own things. The people there are just extremely boring. I usually have no problem talking to people one-on-one. I especially like talking about emotions of the other person and philosophy. In a group situation, my social skills just completely turn off. Deep down, I am an extremely empathetic person. When I see things like the war in Ukraine, I start crying. I have no problem relating to others. I almost never show this to others. I'm always rather cold and emotionally unreactive. Often I'm just living in my thoughts. It gets to a point that I'm so consumed by thinking that I completely forget the world around me. An extreme flow state. This also happens to me at work. The thoughts I have are rarely negative, and when at work, they usually are work-related. How do I solve problem XYZ? As a child until 16 years old, I was the victim to some very harsh bullying. There are very few childhood memories I can think of. I tend to lose friends quickly, and after a rather short while, they bore me. There is nothing that doesn't bore to some extent. All things I do, like sports, I do because I have nothing to do, so why not? When I don't work and have nothing else to do, I just sit in my room. I usually watch YouTube or stare at the wall and listen to music. I have not much to strive for. All my needs are somewhat satisfied except intimacy. Therefore, it feels like I am somehow in a kind of void. Oftentimes, the advice is to do something big. For example, start a business, but why bother? I don't care about the money. I don't need more, and for what would I even use it? There's nothing to strive for me. To me, it feels like life is easy if you play your cards and aren't completely stupid. So, this is a case of someone who is doing everything they're supposed to be doing and finds themselves being empty on the inside, right? Where what we want to kind of think about here is that, so we're supposed to do particular things. And we're sort of taught that, like, this is what you should do. Like, go do something big. Like, go work for a prestigious company. Develop good relationships. Take care of yourself physically. Compete at a national level. And if you do all these things, they don't really say this, but they say, like, you should do all this stuff. There's this implication that you will be happy at the end of it. And this is something that I've worked with a fair amount. Something that, interestingly enough, is happening more and more and more. Where life is being figured out. Or at least that's what we've been told. There's a formula to success at life, right? Go intern at a prestigious tech company. Become an athlete. Develop healthy relationships. Do all of these things. This is what you're supposed to do, right? And as you do these things, the implication is that then you've got nothing to complain about and you will be happy. But as this person figured out, and as many people before them have figured out, and hopefully many people after this person will figure out, that's not actually where happiness or fulfillment comes from. And so if you're in a situation where you're doing everything right, but you feel empty inside, you have to understand where the fulfillment comes from. What is the nature of fulfillment? What is the nature of happiness? Where does it actually come from? And as we'll learn as we sort of explore this person, there's a good reason why this person is blind to it. So let's start by understanding how the mind decides, or how we decide what to pursue. So there are two options. The first is that internally, we've heard this mythical idea that there's drive, right? Like some people like, oh my God, I have passion. I have passion. I want to create, man. I'm an artist. I want to make the world a better place. It's like there are people like that. We've heard of these mythical creatures. They're like, cool, like that's awesome. They're motivated, they sacrifice, they wake up every day at 5 a.m. and they're like, boom, let's do it. Let's do it, man. And so they live these like passionate, fulfilling lives, right? But most of us are like, that's not me. And then if you don't wake up every day with like passion in your heart and like highly, highly motivated to like, you know, make the world a better place, then how do we decide what to do? So in the absence of an internal drive, our mind enters the picture. Our intellect enters the picture. This is something important to understand about intellect. Intellect will fill any void that you have, right? So if we don't have that void, the mind will fill it up. So then the mind will be like, well, we got to do something. So it'll look around externally and it'll say, oh, look, that person is doing that. They seem happy. This person is doing this. They seem happy. This person is doing this. They seem fulfilled. Let's duplicate all of those things. So the mind comes in and it fills in the void of our lack of understanding or lack of experience with hypotheses. And then we act on those hypotheses. Because in the absence of experience, what do you have? The best you can have is a hypothesis. A beautifully constructed intellectual hypothesis, I grant you, logical hypothesis based on all of the stuff that you've read. And yet it is still a hypothesis. It is not a substitute for experience. And so then the mind says, okay, we don't know what we want in life, so let these people seem happy, let's go do that. And hopefully what'll happen is we will find happiness or fulfillment, and we'll stop this empty feeling because those people seem fulfilled. So let's just go do what they do. Monkey see, monkey do. Right? And the mind doesn't tell you, like, because it doesn't know what else to do. It's going to try to solve your problems for you. So it's going to say, like, okay, go compete on a national level, go get a prestigious job, get some financial security. Like, let's check all those boxes. And those all can be important parts of happiness. So we'll get to that in a second. But in the absence of experience, the intellect will fill in things. So simple example. You know, you can watch a lot of pornography and conclude which sexual positions you think are the best. Your mind will do that, right? Without ever having sex, you can conclude which sexual positions are best. But that's the absence of experience, right? It's just some kind of artificial answer that your mind comes to. So like, you see this right now with like the Ukraine-Russia conflict where everyone's like, this is what Ukraine should do. This is what Russia should do. This needs to happen. This needs to happen. This needs to happen. I don't know how many of the people who are making comments really understand anything about economics or global politics or, you know, geopolitics or like military strategy or whatever. Like it's just randoms on the internet that have no idea what they're talking about for the most part. Right? But our mind loves to fill things up with opinions. Everyone's got answers and everyone's an expert. But that's the nature of the mind. It just fills in stuff in the absence of experience. So this is kind of tricky because if you go and you do all these things that are supposed to make you happy and you feel empty on the inside, like, then what? Right? How do you move forward from this? So then the question sort of becomes, how does one discover that internal drive to begin with? And more importantly, what are the things that get in the way of the internal drive? And this is very important. So the internal drive, no, it sounds kind of weird. This is going to blow your mind, okay? Comes from within. Doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the inside. That's why we call it the internal drive. So you can do as much stuff as you want to on the outside, but the internal drive comes from within. And so then it's like kind of like, okay, so if it comes from within, why don't I have it? And this is where it's really important to zero in on a couple of important things from this person's history. And I encourage, if this feels like you, look for these things. Okay? So first thing is, people are extremely boring. Deep down, I'm an empathetic person. I have no problem talking to other people. I especially like talking about the emotions of the other person. I have no problem relating to others. I'm always rather cold and emotionally unreactive. As a child, I was the victim of some very harsh bullying. There are very few childhood memories I can think of. This is an important piece of the puzzle. So generally speaking, if we think about cognitive development, there's a scale of when we develop particular things, okay? So one example is when we're kids, we're sort of focused on learning core parts of ourselves. So we develop some very core parts of our identity, but mostly we're learning about the external world. The start of the process of understanding who you are usually starts around teenage years. So this is like when we become kind of like self-aware and we have this internal environment that is very actually like deep and complex. So the journey to connect with oneself for most people begins in teenage years. First thing to understand. Next thing to understand is that generally speaking, when we're dealing with internal stuff, our mind can't really tune out particular frequencies. All we can do is turn up the volume or down the volume. The other way to understand that is we can numb ourselves up, but we can't like block particular internal things and like let other internal things through. So generally speaking, when we get bullied, what happens is we turn up the dial on numbing. So we start to internally numb ourselves to protect ourselves, because on the inside, when I get bullied, there's so much badness in here, right? I feel bad about myself. People don't like me. I start to dislike myself, and that hurts. So what does the body do when we hurt? It releases natural endorphins, endogenous opioids. We soothe the hurt. Our mind does it too. So what does our mind do? It teaches us how to numb things. So it's like, whoa, 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 we don't like the signals that are coming from the inside. So we're just going to shut off all of the signals from the inside. And as we kind of shut off signals from the inside, then what happens is we start to look like this. So the first thing is I tend to lose friends quickly. Things are boring to you. There's nothing that doesn't bore to some extent. But I have nothing to do, so why not? Boring, boring, boring. So things feel very, very boring to you. So let's try to understand that for a moment. Why do things feel boring to you? So let's think a little bit about fulfillment. Let's say I'm an esports professional. Let's just take a particular game. So whether that game, so let's say I'm playing Dota 2. So when I play a game of Dota 2, how much satisfaction do I get from it? Does that satisfaction come from the outside or the inside? Does winning a game necessarily mean it's fun or not fun? Right? So generally speaking, winning a game may be more dopaminergic, but depending on my attitude towards the game, depending on how I play the game, I can have a fun game that I lost or a boring game that I can win. So it's not purely determined by the external circumstances. The other way to think about it, let's assume that I'm a pro player and that I win a tournament or I don't win a tournament. So generally speaking, even if I win a tournament and I get a prize pool, there's like a larger objective value from winning a tournament. Let's say I make $1 million. So I can feel good because I got $1 million. But then there's some people who actually don't really feel good even after winning a tournament. And so who is it that feels really good about winning a tournament? It's not about the number. I mean, the prize pool has something to do with it. Winning has something to do with it. Dopamine has something to do with it. Money has something to do with it. But the person who feels fulfilled after winning an esports tournament is the one who had an internal drive. I want to be the best player in the world. That's an internal thing. It's not about the dollar value. It's not whether it was 3 million or 4 million. It's not like I'm 33% happier if I make $4 million versus $3 million. The satisfaction from winning an esports tournament comes from in here. It's not actually we're not saying there aren't advantages. We're not saying that dopamine isn't triggered. We're not saying that there aren't financial advantages. We're not saying that you aren't joyous on an emotional level, right? You're happy, but that happiness is temporary. There are also people who have played tournaments and not gotten first place, but they also feel fulfilled. They may not have won, but damn it, they played some of the best, they did some of the best gaming they've ever played, and they can be proud of their performance. Even silver medalists can be incredibly fulfilled. So this is the key thing to understand, is that fulfillment comes from within. And if we use examples of games, like there are times where you can have the same result, but it is your relationship to the result that determines whether it's satisfying or not. The dopamine is fixed. The prize pool is fixed, but your relationship to the thing determines whether you're fulfilled or devastated. And this is why you find everything boring, because you can't contribute that internal component, because that's really where the fulfillment comes from. So then what happens is the only thing that you've got going for you is the dopamine or the external reward. And the dopamine or the external reward will be boring over time. Right? The first time you make $100 playing a video game, you're like, wow, that is, or make $100 streaming, you're like, holy crap, that is absolutely amazing. And then a year later, you make $100 streaming and it's nothing. It's become baseline for you. So the brain acclimatizes and develops tolerance to a given stimulus. You make 100 grand a year. Next year, for year one, you're thrilled. I'm making 6 figures. Next year, it's not enough. I need 120. 120 is fantastic. Next year, I need more. Next year, I need more. Next year, I need more. I've seen this. I've worked with investment bankers and private equity professionals that make $3 million a year. Still not enough. Fulfillment comes from within. This is why everything is so boring, because you don't have that internal component. So eventually your brain acclimatizes to what happens. And it's not enough. That's just the nature of things, right? So then what do you do about it? This is important, because when you started numbing yourself during your teenage years to protect yourself from what happened, you shut off the valve of self-understanding, because you have no idea what's going on in there. In the absence of that, things are going to start becoming boring. And now we can also see, so then what does the mind know? I don't know. My internal environment has become pitch black. All the doors are closed. I have no access to it. So what does this person do? Consumed by thinking. Happens to me at work, work-related. I pay attention to the thoughts of others. I can tune in to other people, right? This person kind of says that. I especially like talking about the emotions of the other person. It's interesting. So where is this person's mind going? Always to the outside, always to the outside, always to the outside. These people love philosophy, because philosophy has no internal component. Philosophy and spirituality are at opposite ends of the spectrum. Philosophy is all about logic and externalization and intellect. So where is the attention of this person focused? Always. Even when it comes to empathy, because this person is not like, they're not like emotionally devoid. They're not sociopathic, right? So they can empathize. They can hurt for other people. When they learn about the things in the Ukraine, they can cry. They can lose their mind in work. They can lose their mind in the emotions of another person. But it's always pointed on the outside, always pointed on the outside, always pointed on the outside. I've got a flashlight, but it's never pointed at me. It's always pointed on something else. And the more that I point it at other things, I don't understand what's going on in here. The more that I don't understand what's going on in here, I can't find fulfillment. It's the crux of the problem. And you can see this like in every dimension of their life. They're doing well at work. They can devote themselves to being a national competitor in a sport. They can listen empathically to other people. They can be so emotionally moved by the pain of what's going on in Ukraine. But they can't be emotionally moved by themselves at all. Completely numb to the internal environment. And it may have started because of the bullying, because that's the chance that you had. You still have another one, don't worry. But that's when most people start to get in tune with themselves, right? So some people, when you look at issues of like gender and sexuality and stuff like that, some people know from very young, but a lot of times people do this exploration during their teenage years and adolescence. The process of becoming an adult, the process of discovering who you are starts in your teenage years. And if you emotionally numb yourself at that point, you're going to miss this. You can still go get it, so don't worry about it. We'll talk about how. But this is important to understand. So if you feel empty on the inside, that's because the fulfillment component comes from the inside. So you can compete on a national level. You can do really well. You can work at a fancy tech company. You can be a wonderful friend to other people. But that sense of boringness will be there. Because the fulfillment, the joy comes from in here. Joy does not come from winning a Dota game, right? Maybe it can. But even I played games against techies in Arc Warden that are 70 minutes long. And in the end, I win because they're ratting me the whole fucking time. And at the end, do I feel victorious? Sure. Do I feel awful about myself on the inside? Yes, absolutely. Do y'all get that? The external world does not bring fulfillment. Internal world brings fulfillment. So now the question becomes, okay, Dr. K, then how the hell do I find this internal world? So, a couple of points. The first is this is why spirituality exists, but you have to be careful because there's a trap here. So this is where I would say meditation can be a very useful tool at discovering who you are. But this is going to be tricky. If you use meditation as an external thing, so if your mind says, if I meditate for a month, I will discover who I am. The meditation is pointed outward. I don't know if that even makes any sense. But you can do spirituality as an outward activity. If I do A, B, C, D, it's like checkboxes. If I go to an ashram for a month and if I meditate, and if I get a subscription to a meditation app and I watch a meditation app for every day and I do the meditation for 20 minutes a day, I will discover myself. It's an externalization of the spiritual process. It's not going to work. May help. You'll even see this with people who are veteran meditators. They're I've been meditating for 3 years and I didn't realize, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong this whole time. Sometimes that's what has to happen. It's kind of weird. Right? Because understanding and experience cannot be taught. As Viktor Frankl said, meaning must be discovered. It cannot be given. It cannot be calculated. It must be found. So you need to look within yourself. And people are how the hell do I do that? It's so meditation is a piece of it. But I'd say go and spend time with yourself. Turn the flashlight to yourself. You say you can cry for Ukrainians. Can you cry for yourself? You say you're interested in the emotions of other people. What about your own emotions? Dig into yourself. Why the fuck am I so bored all the time? Why do I get bored by so many people? What's going on in here? Don't ask yourself the intellectual question and then start reading about it. Just look at yourself. As you're in a conversation with another person, look for the boredom. What is that boredom? Because I guarantee you it's way more than boredom. Boredom is an umbrella term that protects you from all the crap that you want to avoid. Because here's the tricky thing. Boredom, I'm going to let y'all in on a little secret of the mind. When the mind wants to cheat code you to not doing something, when the mind wants to enable cheats and enable God mode, it's this dumbass thinks that he's going to explore something, he's going to get wrecked. She's going to get wrecked. I'm going to enable my Uber cheat code. It's the nuclear weapon of the mind. I'm going to make this person bored. And then they will stop. It's the nuclear weapon of the mind to stop you from doing anything. I'm going to create boredom. And if they're bored, GG. I have nothing to worry about. We want to crush this relationship because it's getting emotionally too close to us. I'm really fine with understanding their emotions, but they're starting to understand ours. We can't have that. Boredom. They're boring. Never going to talk to them again. GG. Boredom is the cheat code of the mind to stop you from doing anything that it doesn't want to do. So think about yourself. What is this boredom? Why are you getting bored of this person? Why do you think the reason you're getting bored is because you can't form an authentic connection with them? An authentic connection requires something in here to plug into something out there. You understand where their plug is. You understand exactly what's going on with them emotionally, but you have no idea how to connect with them. And so it's boring because there's no fulfillment. So everything in your life feels empty, 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 empty. Because you have to contribute something to all of those things to feel fulfilled at being a national champion. Everyone's like, oh my God, this person must be so happy. But like, you don't feel that happiness. You're just like, yeah, I'm sure I'm nationally competitive, but whatever. Job is like, whatever. People are like, whatever. So what's missing? What's the common element? It's not the national competition. It's not the job. It's you, empty on the inside. And you feel it, right? You feel that void, but you don't know how to get to it. So watch out about the boredom. One simple technique that you can do, very hard, tolerate it. Get through it. Look at what the boredom is trying to move you away from. Because you can tell it's going to be like, it's kind of dumb that way. It's strong, but it's dumb. Where it's like, it'll push you away really hard, but you can just see where it's pushing you. And then like, you can look at the opposite direction. You'll discover something about yourself. So meditation can help. Understand the nature of your boredom. The other thing that you can do is go back and access what you numbed as a teenager. Because what do you think your mind is trying to avoid? Why does it want to numb? Because the shit has been there since you were a teenager. And it's not like it goes away, right? If I have a closet full of crap and I shut the door and I stay the hell away from it, it's not like you can do anything. Right? It's not going to go away. So you still have to deal with that problem. You'll get that? So the 3 things you can do: go back to the time you were emotionally numb. Start to actually introspect and look at what bores you. Why does it bore you? Why can't you connect with someone else? And what I'd venture is that what you're actually scared of, the boredom is actually going to be a shield for fear. And the fear is going to be a fear of connection. And that the connection, what you're afraid of connecting is, right now you have such a beautiful ego because you're nationally competitive, you're successful, you're this, so everyone can respect that. But what I would venture, it's a coin toss here, can't really read too much into this, coin toss, that some of the people who are in this situation are afraid that what they are on the inside, because remember, you're that kid who got bullied, right? That's who you really are, and now you've built a life that is protecting you from that. And so why the hell would you want to show anyone the 16-year-old who got bullied when you're such a Chad on the outside? And so anytime someone gets close, you get bored. So go back to when the numbness began, number 1. Number 2, meditate. Pursue a spiritual path. By all means, go hiking, do journaling, go to an ashram, stay at a monastery for a month. Go find yourself. You know, go climb a mountain. Like, all that stuff is awesome. But do it internally, not externally. Don't do it like a checklist. And third thing is look at, in the moment, what you get bored with and what the boredom is trying to keep you away from. And hopefully, through that, you'll discover something on the inside that is not empty. And it's going to be scary because, remember, your mind would rather have emptiness than the crap that's in there. But the cool thing is that underneath that crap, there's something awesome. But you got to get through that crap too. Does that make sense? It's hard. The reason that this problem is so bad, we've known the answer for a long-ass time. The problem is we can't transmit it to anyone. Right? So I can say this, but you ultimately have to do the work. I can say, go to the mountain, go to the top of the mountain, the view is beautiful, but I can never transmit the view of the mountain, which is why it's so damn hard for everyone who walks this journey. And the person who popularized this journey the most, by the way, is Buddha. Gautam Buddha. Because he was a king. He had it all. Beautiful queen, respect of his people, wealth, power. And he woke up one day and was empty. So you're in good company if you fall into this category. And what Buddha discovered is that it all comes from within. And so you have to walk that path now too. It's the only way. No one else can walk it for you. So good luck. So I've noticed, by the way, that we've had a ton of people gifting subs. So like I saw Night Vision gifted subs twice. Thank you so much to you and to everyone else who supports the work we do on stream. We really appreciate it. Are psychedelics help in this? Possibly is the answer. So I do not advocate for the use of psychedelics outside of supervision, like appropriate medical supervision, to be clear. I've seen people that have had positive experiences from psychedelics, and I've seen people that have developed bad mental disorders from the use of psychedelics. But there are a lot of people out there who are proponents for using psychedelics to aid in these kinds of journeys. I am not there yet. So I think that psychedelics are still, generally speaking, dangerous and have therapeutic potential. That's the way I think about them. I think the science really needs to be there. We need to understand more about. So when you use psychedelics, like sometimes people get screwed and sometimes people get saved, and we just don't know which way you go. So psychedelics is playing with fire, and I do not recommend you play with fire. Someone saying that LSD saved their life, and I've seen people for whom LSD has destroyed their life. So it's just, what we know is that chances are it can have a profound impact, but we just don't know if it's good or bad, right? So I'd say steer clear. So thank you all very much for all the support for the work that we do. We really appreciate it. I'm late. Oh crap, I didn't realize I ran over. I was gonna try to speed run that. So I thought that if I didn't use the iPad, I could speed run it. Well, I'm gonna have to pass on meditation today, y'all. So I would say check out YouTube or something like that. Who are we gonna raid? Because we need a couple minutes to raid people too. I really do feel bad about not being able to meditate today. Y'all should meditate on your own. Can we find a small streamer or a big streamer? Okay, tiny. Find the tiniest streamer that ever was, chat. Fevy Night. Gazzy TV. Okay, Fevy Night is playing LOL. Sandra L. 157. Oh, yes. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do Sandra L. I don't even know what they're playing, but they've got 20 viewers. Let's go. Let's go, Sandra L. Wait, hold on. It doesn't look like they're speaking English. Is that okay? What the hell? That's perfect. They don't need to be speaking English. Just go. Just go. Let's go. We have no idea who that is. They're playing Raid Shadow Legends, I guess? I don't know. But whatever. Let's do it. Go, 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 go.